Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. Looking at the Denver Broncos versus the Minnesota Vikings tonight. They're playing in Denver for Sunday Night Football. A 41.5 point total with Minnesota as 2.5 point underdogs in this matchup. Got a Minnesota team with a very good story. Joshua Dobbs joined the team recently, and he's been on fire, helping them to a couple victories. And we got a good story on the Denver side, too, with Russell Wilson kind of finding his way this season, with Sean Payton and Denver being a good surprise team this season. Problem with Denver is Russell Wilson struggles versus the blitz, and the Vikings like to blitz a lot. So I think the $1 million question for tonight is going to be, how does Russell Wilson handle the blitz? Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. This is a show where I like to break down these DraftKings Showdown contests to give you an idea of some good plays to plug in your lineups for DraftKings Showdown. So tonight we're looking at the Denver Broncos versus the Minnesota Vikings. They're playing in Denver. As I mentioned, it's a 41.5 point total with Minnesota as 2.5 point dogs. It's going to be a good game. It's a couple teams that are both on the rise. They both have been doing well defensively the last few weeks. I'm going to be giving you stats that take out weeks 1 through 3. Week 3 is that week where Denver gave up 70 points to Miami. Since then, they have become a completely different team. And understandably, since Sean Payton's a new coach in the system, and it took a few weeks for the team to kind of come around to his coaching style or his coaching to take effect. But recently, they have been a much better team, and it's likely a big reason for that is the coaching. And Minnesota, they've been really good lately too. Josh Dobbs filled in for Kirk Cousins after Kirk tore his his Achilles, so he's out for the season. Josh Dobbs, guy, was tearing it up in Arizona. He started slowing down a little bit before he left, but now he's come to Minnesota and he's had a couple good weeks in a row. So really good story with Josh Dobbs, and we're going to see him go up against a tough Denver defense tonight. So a lot of good implications for showdown lineups and a lot of ways that we can go with this and a lot of narratives that we can build. But before I get into that, hit like on this video. I'm looking for 15 likes. Going to get 15 likes, so I put out a shorter video later on once I've done a little bit more research and dug into the slate a little bit. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shows from the main slate, the plays from the main slate are going off right now. Calvin Ridley's having a huge game. Jaden Reed is having a good game. We have just a lot of the plays that I went over last night as plays that stuck out on the spreadsheet. They're just all going off right now. Unfortunately, I don't play the main slate too much, so I'm not benefiting. But hopefully, people who watched the show last night are having a good day today. So I'm going to get into the analysis now. We're going to take a look at this slate. Justin Jefferson is out. There was talk that he might be activated and might play tonight, but that's not going to happen. He is officially out tonight. Josh Dobbs is one of the main components of tonight's game. If you look at the past 4 weeks or so, he scored 16 points at Seattle, 25 points at Arizona, 27 points at Atlanta, and 25 at New Orleans. Other than that, he went on a little hot streak too in the beginning of the year. But yeah, Josh Dobbs has been great this year. And he's doing it on the ground. He's doing it through the air. So he's been a pretty well-rounded quarterback since he got to Minnesota. he has done really well. It looks like he's benefiting from that system so far. But now that we have a couple weeks of tape in that system, we can kind of see what a good defense like Denver can do with Joshua Dobbs. Still a little bit torn on Dobbs. I think I like him more than I like Russell Wilson tonight. He's got the better DraftKings points matchup. Like as far as DraftKings points allowed, Denver has allowed 17 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, where on Russell Wilson's side, Minnesota has only allowed 14.5 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. This is all since week 4. I'm taking out weeks 1 through 3. So really, people who are looking at the full season are not going to get the same picture. They're going to be skewed numbers with that Miami game in there for Denver. Denver just got killed by Miami, so a lot of those numbers are going to be skewed if people aren't taking into account that it's a completely different team. So, we'll take a look at that and give you a little bit different perspective on this game, hopefully. And let's see. If we look at next guy on this list, we got Russell Wilson. Just talked about him. Now, Russell Wilson is horrible against the blitz, and Minnesota loves to blitz. So it's going to put Russell Wilson in a bad spot. And he's been up and down this season. He's been mostly up. If you look at it from a stats perspective, he's had his best season almost of his career this year, believe it or not. So it's been a great season for Russ Wilson. The last 3 weeks, 19 points against Buffalo. Spread and I were high on the Denver side against Buffalo. We got that right in our showdown analysis. Didn't quite hit with Cortland Sutton, but we got most of the other elements of that game correct. We're looking at 19 points against Kansas City. So 2 tough matchups. Well, Buffalo's not that tough of a matchup, but 2 good teams that they played, and Russ went off against both of them, or went off from a showdown perspective. Green Bay, only 14 points against Green Bay, only 9 points against Kansas City in their first meeting. And then the Jets, he actually had 20 points. That's a tough defense. Chicago, 22 points. Miami, 18 points. Washington, which everybody is just crushing. He scored 30 points, and then 15 at Las Vegas. So Russ has been really good this year. The only thing he has going against him tonight, though, like I mentioned, is that blitzing of Minnesota. Flores, we've talked about it every time Minnesota's been on one of these showdown slates. He loves to blitz. And Russell Wilson, not good versus the blitz. So I'm tending to lean towards a fade of Russ Wilson tonight if I need to lop out one of these high salaried guys when I'm building my lineups. Hockenson, TJ Hockenson has been on fire with Dobbs. As you can see, he's got 15 targets last week, 12 targets the week before that, 9 before that, and then 12. Now, the issue with Hockenson tonight is if Denver's defense is good, and they're obviously going to be aware of Hockenson being the primary target of Dobbs so far. So that's the only thing I'd be concerned about. But otherwise, he's got a really good matchup tonight against Denver, because Denver is, since week 4, they've allowed the most points, DraftKings points per game, to the tight end position. And in a favorable spot like this, where Hockenson is the favorite target of Dobbs, and Dobbs doesn't have the worst matchup for a quarterback, like this could be a situation where Hockenson can go off. I like the matchups against Denver in general for Minnesota, just because Minnesota has a good running back matchup as well. And Minnesota has, Denver's been allowing 26 points a game to the running back position. So that puts Minnesota's rushing game in a good spot. But it's mostly been explosive runs that have done the damage against Denver's run D lately. So it's an interesting spot because Alexander Madison was questionable with a concussion for most of the week. It's looking like he's trending towards playing. He's expected to play tonight, but he really hasn't done anything. So he's not an explosive runner, and he hasn't done anything, but his presence in this game may detract a little bit from Tai Chandler. Tai Chandler was a rookie that some people were high on in the beginning of the season. People were drafting him and fading Madison from a fantasy analyst perspective. And last week, he got 15 touches, 15 rushing attempts, that is, for 45 yards, and he scored a touchdown. He ended up getting 10 and a half DraftKings points, so had a decent showing there, but he hasn't done anything for the rest of the year. Now, I'm not sure what his situation is as far as, his speed score or anything like that, but I can't imagine that he would not be more explosive than Alexander Madison, the way that Madison's been playing tonight. And Tai Chandler is going to have a chance to, he's going to get a lot of opportunity tonight. So he'll have a chance to break one versus this Denver defense. And I like Tai Chandler tonight as hopefully lesser owned play. He's just in a good matchup versus this defense, and he has a lot of decent potential tonight. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on Tai Chandler and any indication of what the workload's going to be tonight. I'm seeing that it's looking like it's going to be a split, pretty even split, quote unquote. So, he's finally going to get an opportunity here midway through the season. So we'll see what he can do. As you can see from his game log, he hasn't had like virtually any opportunity up until last week, where he got 15 touches and he got 45 yards, a touchdown off those. And that was against New Orleans, who's a pretty good defense. So I kind of like Tai Chandler in this matchup tonight. I like, let's see, went over Hackinson, who I like. Javante Williams is going to get a lot of work regardless of the matchup tonight because, as I said, Russ Wilson is not good against the blitz, so they're probably going to be run heavy tonight, which makes me like Javante a lot. Javante doesn't have the best matchup, though, because Minnesota's only allowing 18 points a game, DraftKings points a game to the running back position. But I do like Javante because there's an injury to the linebacker unit of Minnesota. They're missing Jordan Hicks, who's going to be out. So that's going to be beneficial to the running game and to tight ends of Denver's side. But Denver doesn't really have any tight ends that are worth starting, really, except for Troutman. But he's just more of a blocking tight end, it seems. So not really interested in Troutman, but Javante, I think, is interesting with this matchup tonight. And let's see. Let me see if we can find another nugget here on the Denver side. Okay, so this is courtesy of Rich Rebar. 48.7% of the Denver yardage over the past 5 games has been gained via rushing. So that's the highest rate in the league. And that is another thing that kind of points me on Javante Williams, despite the matchup maybe being a little bit more difficult. If we look at some of the running back performances versus Minnesota, Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, that team's just a mess, like in general, with the way that they split the load. But those two combined for about 18 points against Minnesota. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones have not been playing well this year. They only combined for 19 points against Minnesota. McCaffrey had 23 points against Minnesota. Justin Fields, let's see, Deontay Foreman and Darrington Evans only combined for 11 points against Minnesota, so they held them in check. They were able to hold Pacheco and McKinnon in check. So we're not seeing exactly gangbusters for running backs that they faced. Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders was another pair that they faced. Joshua Kelly was in for Austin Eckler when they faced the Chargers. So He didn't do anything. DeAndre Swift scored 30 points on them, and then Rachaad White. So they really have not faced, really, apart from from Swift and McCaffrey, they haven't faced like a top tier type of running back, unless you count Bijan. But the way that they're using Bijan has not been very, very great. So I think that Javante is going to be an interesting guy, and if people shy away from him, because of the matchup, like, it could put us in a good spot. Let me see what they did against them last week, what the Saints did against them. Kamara had 18.5 points against them last week. So maybe that's kind of a range that we could anticipate for Javante. Similar offenses, and they obviously come off of the Peyton tree. Similar running backs too. We know with Lombardi, the offensive coordinator over in Denver, they like to utilize the running back in the passing game as well. So we can check and see real quick what the receiving game is doing against Minnesota as far as the running back, and they're bottom 10. So they are not a good team to throw the running back against. So yeah, Minnesota solid against the run, but maybe the usage that Javante gets will make him interesting, especially when we're looking at a bad matchup for Russell Wilson too. So let's see. Hackinson, love Hackinson tonight. Addison has not been targeted much by Dobbs since Dobbs came, or has not been effective with the targets. 7 targets last week, 7 targets the week before that, 8 targets against Green Bay. So he hasn't been horrible. And Denver is, let's see, what's Denver giving up to wideouts here? Doesn't have the best matchup, but Denver is giving up 12 DraftKings points a game to wideout position, which is kind of middling. So not the best matchup there for Addison. Makes me lean more towards Hockenson as a captain. And Addison, I'm not going to go heavy on Addison, but I'm not going to fade him either. Cortland Sutton had that big week last week. We went with Judy. And again, like with this matchup, Judy has the better matchup again. Looks like they are giving up 15 points a game to wideouts and 17.6 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. As far as a DVOA perspective, Jerry Jeudy has the best matchup of the night, and he's a perennial disappointment. He's let us down every time that I've talked about starting him. So it'll be painful to plug him in, but Judy on paper looks like he has the best matchup. But it could be a thing where Russ Wilson, he just has his guy in Sutton and he likes throwing to him. And Sutton is the guy that he targets the most when he's getting blitzed, but Judy is the guy that gets targeted the most in zone coverage, which is what Minnesota likes to run the most. So you can make a case for either of those guys. If I was fading Wilson and just playing one of the wide receivers, which I'm likely to do, I'll probably just stick with Sutton and then sprinkle in some Judy, because we really have not seen Judy do much of anything this season. His highest points are 13.1, which he did against Miami in week 3, and then he scored 13 against Kansas City a couple weeks ago. Last week, when we plugged him in against Buffalo, he only got us 6.5 points and basically cost us a bunch of money because we needed Sutton in there. Madison, not going to have much of Madison at all. He hasn't really done anything, and on top of that, he's hurt, and he's in just a timeshare now. So Madison I'll probably shy away from. They've been trying to bring in guys. They brought in Akers because Madison wasn't cutting it, and Akers got hurt, unfortunately, and now Tai Chandler finally gets his chance to step up. So Tai Chandler's the guy that I like. If I'm starting one of these guys tonight, you can get him at $7K on DraftKings. So pretty good price there. The matchup again, Denver's just allowing 26 points a game to the running back position, so it's a really good matchup. So I probably want to have at least one of those Minnesota running backs in at least, like every lineup. I'd say it's probably the best matchup on the slate. Apart from Hockenson, Osborne, he was in concussion protocol as well this week, but it looks like he's going to play. 3.5 points against Atlanta, 18 points against Green Bay, 10 points against San Francisco. He's been up and down. He's a good guy to go to, like if you're in need of the salary relief. And as far as a matchup perspective goes, Addison has the best DVOA matchup. He's actually got like one of the best DVOA matchups on the slate. So maybe I take that and walk that back a little bit with Addison here. I'm just kind of looking at that DVOA now. Now the DVOA on where Addison lines up the most on the field, he lines up the most on the right side of the field, and that is where Minnesota is the worst team in the NFL, basically, from a DVOA perspective. So Addison goes right back in the player pool, and he could be interesting if people are looking more at the points allowed as opposed to like some of those underlying stats. So keep Jordan Addison in mind tonight. Let's see what wide receivers have done against Minnesota so far. We go to their matchups. No one on the Falcons did anything versus them. Jaden Reed had success against them. He's a slot receiver. Romeo Dobbs as well. They only scored 12 points and 12 points each. Ayuk and Jennings scored 11 points each. DJ Moore only scored 10 points against them. So, I mean, Rashee Rice scored 13 points against them. Thielen and Marshall each scored 15 points against them. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are the only ones who've had real success against them. Allen scored 48 points against them. Let's see. Oh, these are all against Denver. Let me find the Broncos side. All right, so the types of receivers that have had success against the Broncos, we got nobody did anything on the Bills, and that's so they shut down Stephon Diggs. They shut down the Chiefs. They shut down the Packers. Jaden Reed, again, he pops up. He scored 11 points. Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice scored 11 points against them. Jets did not do anything against them. DJ Moore had 30 points against them. That was the week that we had DJ Moore as the captain. So that was week 4. And Tyreek Hill had 33 points against them. Terry McLaurin had 16 points against them. Jacoby Myers had 29 points against them. So since they've tightened things up with the defense, there hasn't really been too much success against them. So Jordan Addison, he's got a good DVOA matchup that accounts for the entire season. But as far as if we're cutting out the last, the first 4 weeks of the season, then Jordan Addison his matchup just does not look as good. And if we just looking at those stat lines recently against the Denver D, it doesn't look like receivers are having a whole lot of success. But Addison's an interesting guy regardless. So if we go a little bit further down past these backup quarterbacks, this is the type of game that is going to be good for kickers, I think, because I think these are a couple tough defenses, and we have Russell Wilson who struggles against the blitz, and then we have on the other side Dobbs who's a journeyman. He's doing well, but we don't know when that carriage is going to turn back into a pumpkin. Could be tonight. And if they're able to slow him down, then maybe they they don't have opportunities to convert on touchdowns, and they got to kick field goals instead. So that keeps both these kickers in play tonight. Marvin Mims has not done anything. We try to go for him regularly, and he always disappoints. One target in each of the last 3 weeks. Like I'm just kind of getting off of Marvin Mims, but I think he's a guy that you want to sprinkle in at the very least because he had a ton of snaps last week. So he was heavily involved in the actual game, even though he got no targets. So he was on the field a lot, and that's what we're looking for in Showdown. And as far as his matchup, he's got a pretty decent one from a DVOA perspective, and Denver is also, or Minnesota is also allowing 15 points a game to those wideouts. So, maybe keep Mims in your pool, but limit your exposure to him. Vikings D. I kind of like the Vikings D tonight. Russell Wilson doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes, but he likes to hold on to the ball. He doesn't like to go on his first read, as I was talking about last time with spread. Last time we saw the Broncos in a showdown slate was last Monday. So, yeah, Russell Wilson likes to progress through his reads, and if he's getting blitzed, he's going to be holding on to the ball too long. He's going to get sacked a lot tonight. So I like the Vikings. I think they're going to get a decent amount of sacks tonight, and I would not be surprised if they get a fumble at some point. And whether or not they cash that in for a touchdown remains to be seen. But they are playing in Denver, so that people are going to shy away from the Vikings D playing a away game. But the matchup and Russ Wilson going to hold on to the ball a lot tonight. I just think that he's going to get a decent amount. Vikings D is going to get a decent amount of sacks on him. Broncos D, similar situation with Dobbs. He's a good story, but with enough tape on him in the system, we could see the Broncos come in with an effective game plan and kind of ruin the hopes and dreams of Dobbs tonight. So keep the Broncos in your player pool because you can build some good scripts around that Broncos D being effective tonight. Powell's been interesting. He didn't do anything really. Last week he had 5 targets. He had 3 targets versus Atlanta, 3 targets versus Green Bay, 5 targets versus San Francisco. It looked like for a minute there that he was going to be the guy in that. I remember going into that San Francisco game, he had a decent amount of projections, and he had a pretty good game against San Francisco. He scored 11 DraftKings points, but after that, he hasn't really done a whole lot. He scored 10 against Atlanta, 8 against New Orleans. Maybe he's not meshing well with Dobbs, but Brandon Powell, he's a guy that you probably want to keep him in your pool, but limit your exposure to. Let's see. Troutman is a guy that I talked about earlier. He's a lot more expensive than the last time we saw him, and he has done nothing to warrant that. But as far as a matchup perspective, tight ends against Minnesota are scoring 12.5 DraftKings points, which is middling. So not really high on Adam Troutman, and probably leave him out of the player pool tonight. Samaje Perine is the backup for the Denver side, but Javante's getting so much of the workload. I'm probably going to stay away from these backups in a tough matchup. Oliver, the backup tight end for Minnesota, maybe he gets some sprinklings in there when Hackinson is out of the game, but at 2,600, he's to me, he's just not worth it. Lil Jordan Humphrey, he's one of Sean Payton's guys from New Orleans. Followed him over to Broncos. He hasn't done anything. Not interested there. I'm trying to see if I can see any dumpster diving moves that we can take tonight. Yeah, no dumpster dives tonight. Looks like it's going to be pretty pretty tight tonight. So I'm going to avoid, avoid those low priced guys. I don't think we're going to need them tonight, but let's try and build a lineup and see where it takes us. I'll show you where the chalky lineup is going to be, what the optimizer is spitting out for us. Looks like they are leaning Javante in the captain. I do like Javante as a captain option tonight. Not as much as Hockenson, but the optimizers like Javante too. And every time I've tried to fight the optimizer, they end up winning. Let's see. McLaughlin is the other guy that they like. They like both running backs in there. As far as Sutton, they got in there as an expensive guy, and they got Russ Wilson too. Not really paying attention to the matchup, I'm assuming. They got Will Lutz in there as an option. Let's see how this game script plays out, if it makes any sense. They got Will Lutz in there, and then at least 10-8 for Dobbs. So Dobbs in a 5-1 build, I'm not a fan of this build. I like Hackinson too much. I think this is way too heavy on the Denver side, which makes me interested in, what we're seeing for the split. So it looks like Denver 4-2 builds are 36% owned. Denver 5-1 builds are 10% owned. So right now at 3 p.m., the optimizer is spitting out heavy Denver builds. And I kind of like Minnesota more in this matchup. So let's try to do a build where we just clear this out. I like Hockenson. I like Dobbs with his ability to run. I think this is a matchup where you can plug those guys in and you can plug in Denver's defense against them. But let's go with Javante Williams. I'm going to skip Russ Wilson in this one for now. Let's say we go with Sutton. Maybe that's our other Denver guy. And if we look a little further down, I could see us going with Joseph. Because I'm thinking that Minnesota is going to be more effective moving the ball. I talked up Chandler, so let me get Chandler in there instead. So that leaves us with 1,300 if we want to go in that direction. We can get basically nobody there. So maybe if I take out Sutton and go with a better matchup in Judy, even though it pains me to do that, only saves us a little bit. So maybe we go with no quarterback tonight. If we take out Dobbs, and then we put in, let's put Chandler in there. Or I'm sorry, Joseph in there. So this gives us a script at least where Hockenson is racking up the PPR yards. Greg Joseph and Tai Chandler are taking it once they get in the red zone. Maybe Tai Chandler scores a touchdown or two, and maybe Greg Joseph is getting the field goals over on the. Let's get Judy out of there. Let's get Sutton in. We got Sutton and Williams doing the most damage for the Denver side. This type of lineup is going to leave us with 6,700. Gives you options like if you wanted to throw in one of the defenses, if you wanted to throw in Mims. It's going to leave money on the table, but I kind of like how this build flows, and I really just not that interested in these quarterbacks in middling matchups. And they're expensive too. It's 10-6 for Dobbs and 10K for Wilson. So they priced up the quarterbacks, it seems. Yeah, Hockenson is definitely my favorite play. And if we take out Sutton and we wanted to put in, let's put Dobbs back in. Okay, so with this direction, that leaves us with 4,300 at least. 4,300 would enable us to put in, McLaughlin if you wanted to. You can kind of see why the optimizer was putting in McLaughlin. P. Ryan's another option. McLaughlin's the more explosive guy, so I would lean towards McLaughlin, but let's see how much work he got last week. He only got 2 targets. He had 6 rushing attempts, 3.2 yards, 3.2 DraftKings points. And then you compare that with P. Ryan, and P. Ryan had 1 rushing attempt and 3 targets. He ended up getting 7.3 DraftKings points last week. But, I think that McLaughlin has kind of been heavier in that backup role. If we wanted to take Joseph out and sub him in for Lutz, assuming that they're playing conservative, Denver side's going to be – they've been playing conservative, using Russ as more of a game manager, especially in these tougher matchups. So maybe that sets us up with 4,500. We could put in the Broncos defense if you wanted to there. Brandon Powell is an option. I don't hate that direction too, but I kind of lean more towards maybe getting. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate this way too. I think if I went that other direction with that other kicker, I'd McLaughlin would probably be my my lean as far as who I would want to plug in there. Dobbs. If I take Dobbs out and I put in Wilson, let's say Wilson is able to overcome all that stuff. That leaves us with 5,100. That leaves you at least with the option to put in the Vikings D. But I think ultimately Sutton is who I like here. Sutton, and instead of Lutz, I want to get that Minnesota kicker in there. And then that leaves us with 6,700, as I was talking about earlier. You could put Osborne in there. That I don't hate that, but if you put another receiver in there, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense not to have Dobbs in there. Is the only problem. But you have Mims as an option. You have Lutz, Vikings. I think it will be a game that hits the under. 41.5 point total. Minnesota 2.5 point dogs. I could see this going either way tonight, and I could see it being a low scoring game, just based on these matchups that the quarterbacks have. Hawkinson's the one that has really the best matchup, in addition to Tai Chandler. If we're assuming that Tai Chandler is going to get that work as the running backs tonight, but that's a breakdown. Hit like. Get me to 15 likes on this, and I'll put out a video with a little bit more research done later on tonight. You 4 picks, including a captain option. But I can tell you right now that Hackinson's going to be my guy at captain tonight, or Javante Williams. But have a better idea of ownership later on. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel again. As I mentioned, like our guys are all going off that we discussed in the Stack Show last night. So a lot of good stuff happening today, and we've been hitting, me and Spread, when Spread's been joining me, we've been hitting these Gamescript shows pretty good, and then I've been pretty good at it too, especially on Sundays. I think I don't have as much time to overthink on Sundays, so just more going off of what the spreadsheet is telling me, and right now, what I just went over in this show, that's what it's telling me tonight. So good luck, everybody. And I will see you on Monday. Going to have a ton of Thanksgiving game scripts coming up too, and breakdowns for the Thanksgiving slate. So good luck, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow.